Chapter 12. Knowing what you're doing and why. One of the corniest slogans in sales training, you used to hear it all the time and maybe you still do, is this one: plan your work and work your plan. I've heard it 100 times at least, and I am sure that everybody above a certain age in the automobile selling business has heard it that much or more. It used to be said so often everybody made jokes about it. But let me tell you something that I have learned in my years in this business. That is the best advice you can get. The trouble with the slogan is that it is so cute and tricky, and it is said so much it loses its meaning. But what it means is still the best advice you can get. It really says two different things. One is that you should be in command of yourself and of what you do. This means that you are not operating by a series of accidents, such as who happens to walk through the door of your place of business when you are at the head of the line of salesmen. Two is that if you figure out the right moves to make and make them, they will bring in business for you. I have talked about business cards and direct mail, bird dogs and phone calls. I have not said very much about what we mostly think of as selling. I have said very little about what you say to the prospect when you finally have him face to face. I will say a good bit about that in the chapters to come. But if you don't read beyond this chapter, and if you do the things I have described, you will sell a lot of whatever it is that you sell. That will happen for several reasons, but the most important of those reasons is that you will get a lot of people coming in and asking for you, or you'll have more prospects to call on. And even if you are only an average or below average presenter and closer, you are bound to do a lot better than you ever did before in your life. You don't have to close better to sell more. Remember that we have been talking about planting and harvesting, filling and emptying the seats on the Ferris wheel. We have been talking about the odds and the probabilities of business. Now there is no way you can doubt that if you do everything in the face-to-face selling situation exactly the way you have always done it before, you will sell a lot more if you do it a lot more. We are now talking about nothing but quantity. I am deadly serious. If you get twice as many people to come to you every day, you will sell twice as many people as you used to. If your normal pace is to sell 50% of your customers, and you have 2 a day, you get 1 sale a day. That is basic arithmetic. You don't have to have a high school diploma to figure that out. But now let's go to some bigger numbers. If you manage to get 4 customers a day and do the same thing as before, you will still sell only half of them. But now you will be getting 2 sales a day. You have just doubled your output. You think I'm trying to be funny, but I'm not. I am deadly serious. As I said before, just stop and think how much time you spend doing nothing but waiting for traffic through the door or a lead to call in. Up to now, maybe you thought that was how it works. Maybe you figured that what you were making was all that you could expect to make unless you got lucky. You have probably had hot streaks when everything worked for you. The traffic streamed through the door, and everybody who came in bought twice what they usually buy. Wow, you said. If only I could keep this up. Well, let me tell you something. You can keep it up. For sure, you can get more people to come in to see you. And even if they only buy as often and as much as before, you will be on a permanent hot streak compared to your usual volume. How to boost your kill rate is another story, and we'll get to some parts of it. But that really doesn't matter at all if you get the first part right. That is, if you get more people coming through the door to see you. And the way you do that is to go back to that tired old slogan, plan your work, and work your plan and do it. Do it. Do it. Work smart, not hard. I am not joking. What I am saying is that the way to get the job done is to decide what it is every day. I mean, you must, I don't say should take some time every morning and decide what you are going to do that day. And then you must do it. Don't get me wrong. I am not sitting here preaching about the glories of hard work. I don't believe in hard work. I believe in good work. I believe in smart work. I believe in effective work that works. So what I do every morning is figure out what I am going to do that day. The first thing I do is check my appointment book to see what I am locked into. It might be a lunch with a finance company loan officer. It might be that I called a customer the other day who was due for a new car. It is a good thing to arrange your card file of sold customers in more than one way. You want to have them alphabetically so you can find somebody by name. But it also helps to have another set by date, so that if somebody bought from you yesterday, he goes to the back of that file, and so on. That way you can start from the front and see who is due. Sometimes when I have some free time, I call those people just to remind them that maybe they want to come in and talk about a new car. I will do that with a lot of the list around the time the new models come in. If I have been doing that lately, I will have a number of appointments in my book, spread over a month or so. That is because I try to get people to set a day and time when they will be in. I don't just say, "Sam, the new cars are in and I hope you drop by to see them." I lay it on them. "Come on in this afternoon, Sam, about 4, okay?" If he can't make it then, he has to give me a time when he can. And then I have a customer coming in. And I write it down in my book then and there. I have a pretty good memory, but I never trust it. Alright, so I check my book and see that I have an appointment in the afternoon. Obviously, I can't predict who will come in out of the blue and ask for me. A lot of people do it every day. I am not surprised when they do, because practically everything I do every day is aimed at getting that flow of people into me. But there will be free time every day, and I want to be sure that I am going to be filling it with something designed to get even more of them in. Since my direct mail program is too big for me to handle on my own these days, I have people who do the work for me. But in the days before it reached its present scale, I did it myself, sending out a certain number of pieces every morning. Usually, I did it during the times when I was next up and had nothing else to do. At those times, I wanted to be able to leave whatever I was doing to handle the next customer through the door because it was my turn. Addressing mail is the safest thing to be doing at those times. If you're on the phone when you're up, you run the risk of having to tell a live phone prospect that you'll call him back, and that is something you never want to do. But when I was not up, I would be working on some direct mail or making some calls, or I would be building some goodwill somewhere on the premises, maybe out back in the service department. I'll explain later how important I consider my relations with that part of the operation, or maybe I am upstairs talking to the people on the office staff. The administrative part of a sales operation can make the difference between a satisfied and a dissatisfied customer, even when you do everything right. Lose one day, but not 250. But I want to say one thing about my work schedule. If I get up in the morning and feel depressed for some reason and I can't shake it, I may decide not to go to work at all. Or I may look out the window and decide it's a good day to go out in my boat. I don't do that very often, maybe once or twice a year. And I don't recommend not working as a way to build business. But sometimes you know you just aren't going to be worth anything on the job. If you go in on that day, you may wind up making a bad mistake or getting into a fight with somebody that will cost you 250 people. If that seems like what the day is going to be about, you are better off not going in. Cancel your appointments if you have any, and then play golf or go to a movie or to the races or treat yourself well in some other way. That's not to say that you are not treating yourself well when you work well and make money and please customers. But if you really are convinced that you won't do anybody any good by going to work for a morning or an afternoon or a whole day, then don't do it. Because you don't want to carry dissatisfactions of any kind into your place of business. They can be like contagious disease. If those feelings keep up for more than a day, you've got problems that I can't help you solve. But if they happen just once in a while, then plan your day to do something else. But be damned sure that the reason you are feeling dissatisfied isn't because you didn't do a good job the day before. Because if that's why you feel that way, I have found that the best way to cure it is to go to work with a plan and a resolve to do better. One sure way to get over the dissatisfactions of a bad day is to review that day and try to understand why what happened to you happened. I do that at the end of every working day. I replay the day, examining every sale I made and everyone I lost. That's right, I don't sell everybody I see. This is why I spend so much of my money and energy making sure that I will see a lot of people. I play the percentages I recommend that you play. Maybe I sell only half the people I see in a day. But that usually means I see at least 10 people and sell at least 5 of them. I have been averaging better than 5 cars a day every day in recent years, not because I have a high kill rate, but because I have a high prospect rate. But I go over every contact I made during the day. What did I say to that fellow that finally made him buy? Why did that other guy from East Detroit really not buy? Was he just shopping for sport? Or is that too easy a way to explain away some mistake I made? When I first began to do this kind of customer by customer analysis of my day, if I couldn't think of a mistake I made, I would sometimes call up the customer I lost. I would tell him who I was and why I was calling. People usually want to help you. I'd say I was trying to learn the business and learn from my mistakes. A lot of times they would say that they were Ford or Plymouth guys from way back, but they just wanted to see if Chevrolet maybe had something they ought to know about. That might mean that I didn't sell my product well enough against the competition, or they might tell me that they got a better price somewhere else. I'd question them very carefully about the optional equipment they got and the trade and allowance on their car. Sometimes a salesman who has some control over the price he charges gets too greedy and doesn't recognize that a small cut or something extra thrown in can lock up a deal. Incidentally, my replay of each day is not just my idea. Some of the greatest and most successful people in history developed this habit and attribute much of their success to it. I know that for the time it takes me, I have been rewarded handsomely. Want some good advice? Try it. I always try to compare my own feelings about a customer, especially if I lose him, with what he says about why he didn't buy from me and did buy from somebody else. People sometimes think they know more about themselves and their feelings and reactions than they actually do. And there is nothing more important to learn about yourself than the difference between the way you see something and the way the guy on the other side of the deal sees it. Because you never want to be on the other side. Your success in winning the war comes with narrowing and finally eliminating the gap between you and the customer. You want both of you on the same side, and what this means is that you have to do the maneuvering to get you both on the same side, whatever tools and methods you use to do it. Knowing what you lost helps you win. But I always want to know why I lost every sale I lost. And I hardly ever accept "I was just looking" as the answer, because if somebody takes my time and his to come all the way over to our place just to look, he is already partly sold, and I want to know why I didn't get him totally sold. I think that this is a rule that is good maybe 95% of the time in automobile selling, and it is probably good most of the time in every kind of selling. If someone comes in and is just looking, he has enough interest to be sold most of the time. So if you let him just look every time, you are probably not getting nearly your share of sales. And if you try and fail, don't charge it off in your mind to just looking. Analyze your performance in the confrontation and try to see where you failed to convert him. Because chances are you did fail. This sounds like negative rather than positive thinking, but it isn't at all. Look at it this way. You are thinking most positively when you believe that you should be able to sell everybody who comes in. Realistically, of course, nobody can do that. But it is still a very effective attitude to have. It encourages you to analyze every lost sale to see why you lost it, so that you can try to correct the mistake next time you run into the same kind of situation. Just keep in mind that somebody who is just looking may really be saying that he is scared of you and of your ability to get him to part with his money, even if it is for something he really wants to buy. I have called the selling situation a war, a contest, and a confrontation. But I don't mean that you should act this way when you are in this situation. A wrestling match won't get your customer over his fear, but once you have him in front of you, your most effective approach may be let him, not make him. And that applies to what he wants to look at or talk about or anything else. Because if he feels free even to walk out, he will get over that first fear, and that's what you want. I've heard it said that anyone who sells as many cars as I do must be strictly a high-pressure salesman. To me, a high-pressure salesman tries to make people buy. I let them buy. I believe one of the most important determining factors of a sale is, does the prospect likes, trusts, and believes me? If I fail to develop these attitudes in a prospect, chances are I've also failed to make a sale. It's pretty tough to make someone like you, but you can, by the things you say and do, let him like you. I feel this philosophy has helped make me number one, and if you want to make a lot of money selling, then you, too, should develop the philosophy, let him, don't make him. Attitude planning is as much a part of planning your selling day as anything else. If you feel lousy, you still usually have to go to work. So what you have to do is get hold of your negative feeling, whatever it is, and face it, even if you can't make it go away. That way, when you get somebody through the door or on the phone, you can shove your lousy feelings aside. But first, you have to recognize how you feel, or else you won't be able to plan and deal with your own feelings. And you can be sure that if you are not in control of what is going on inside of you, you will certainly communicate your bad feelings to somebody who comes in suspicious of you, to begin with. When I replay my day each night, I find that I really can have total recall of what I said and did. And I don't fall asleep until I am sure that there was nothing I could have done to convert the B-backs and the other lost sales. And remember that the be back had better be written off the minute he walks out the door. I think I am pretty good at judging customers and hanging on to them. But when I hear a guy say he'll be back, I figure he is gone forever. Sometimes they do come back because some people really do tell the truth. But if you are counting on be backs as part of your future earnings, you are still an amateur who is fooling himself. One thing that I have found it is something nobody likes to admit is that maybe somebody else can sell a person if you can't. A lot of businesses require that a salesman turn over a customer to somebody else in the place before they let him walk. I like to think that nobody is better than I am, but nobody is perfect. So it is sometimes useful to bring over somebody else in a way that doesn't make the customer more resistant. You don't want him to think he is being pressured. For a while, I used to have an arrangement with other salesmen in my place that if they couldn't sell somebody, I would pay them $10 for a chance to try to sell him myself. I won't ask you to believe that I could sell them all, but I did sell some of them. I quit doing that, though, because the other salesmen got sore when I got the big commission and all they got was a $10 bill. They did not accept the idea that my $10 had bought all rights to a customer they had given up on. They wanted to split the commission with me, so I dropped the idea. I suggest that if you want to try anything like that, you make sure that everybody understands in advance the terms of the arrangement. But I also recommend trying it sometime, because there is no better practice of your selling techniques than working on somebody who is about to walk out. And there is no better feeling than when you convert one into a sale. In a way, it is one of the very best tests of your skills. But if you are going to try it, be sure that you know something about the selling methods and techniques of the other people in your place of business. That way you can try something different from what the other salesman did. There is no point in doing and saying the same things to the customer that the other salesman tried. You want to approach him differently. Of course, sometimes it is useful to do it straight on by asking him what he was looking for or need that the other fellow didn't show him. You don't want to run down the people you work with. But sometimes if you ask a question like that, it will let a person know that you are trying to help him, and he will let down his guard and help sell himself. As I have been saying, the most important thing a salesman can do is get them through the door so he can face them. Getting them in requires planning, and planning requires making a lot of decisions about who your best prospects are and how they can be reached most efficiently and economically. You have to make decisions about the cost of getting a prospect and his potential value once you get him. But what determines cost and value is the availability of your time. If you have a lot of unoccupied time and you work well on the telephone, it may be most economical some days to concentrate on phoning old customers or even be backs, if you were able to get their names and addresses before they got away. Phone calls may work well for you, but they take a lot of time per call and per prospect. When you don't have that kind of time, sending out a few mailing pieces is as good as any other way of using free time. It certainly is the most useful way to fill up time when you are next up on the floor because you can interrupt any time your next customer walks in. The point is that you can plan this kind of activity with a lot of accuracy. The unexpected happens almost every day to most salesmen, so you can't nail everything down perfectly, and you should be ready to change your plan whenever something clearly more productive comes along. The value of the plan for keeping yourself moving and keeping the flow of prospects coming in is obvious. But even when you have to change plans, you still get a lot of momentum by having a plan in the first place. If I know exactly what I intend to do when I come into the showroom in the morning, that knowing motivates me a lot more strongly than an attitude of wait and see. You've probably been told all kinds of things to say to yourself in the mirror to lift your spirits and clear your mind of negative thoughts. I certainly don't want to knock any of that if it works for you. But in my own experience, I don't know anything that gets me closer to that first sale of the day than the plan I make every morning. Because when I walk out the door of my house in the morning, one thing is for sure. I know where I'm going and what I'm going to do. And whether or not the whole thing changes the minute I walk into the office doesn't matter. Because I came in with motivation, with assurance that I had an important reason for being there. And that is the most important reason for planning your work, even if you can't work out every or any detail of your plan that day. It is the first push that you give yourself that moves you closest to the first sale, and I don't have to tell a professional salesman how important the first sale of the day is. You know how good it feels. You know it makes you feel that you are in the right business at the right place at the right time. Plan your work every day and work your plan if you can. That may be an old-time, old-fashioned slogan, but I think I have demonstrated how much value it still has for all of us. And then finish your day with a review of everything you did to see how good your plan was and how realistic it was. If you keep falling short of all you intended to do, don't beat yourself up. Maybe your problem is that you are trying to do too much. I'm not trying to let anybody off the hook. All of us work pretty hard a lot of the time. But the question, as I have said, isn't how hard we work, but how well. So if you planned to make 10 phone calls and made only 5, did you work your plan for those 5? That is the kind of thing you want to ask yourself when you review your day. This is the kind of question that really gives you the measure of your motivation and your effectiveness as a professional. Plan your work. Work on your plan. Do it. Chapter 12. Honesty is the best policy. When I say that honesty is the best policy, I mean exactly that. It's a policy and the best one you can follow most of the time. But a policy, as I mean it, is not a law or a rule. It is something that you use in your work when it is in your best interests. Telling the truth usually is in your best interests, of course, especially if it is about something that a customer can check up on later. Nobody in his right mind would dream of telling a customer he had bought an 8-cylinder car when what you sold him was a 6-cylinder model. The first time he opened the hood and counted the wires coming out of the distributor cap, you would be dead, because he would badmouth you to a lot more than 250 people. That's not the kind of thing I am talking about when I suggest that maybe there are times when you won't tell the truth to a prospect. Suppose a prospect calls me up and asks me if I have a certain car, equipped a certain way. Do you know what I am going to tell him? That's right. I am going to say, I have one out on the lot and you can pick it up today. Now I may have been telling the truth or I may not, because I do not look at the inventory file when I get a call like that. I want the man to come in. Chances are I do have the car because we carry a very large inventory. Or if I don't, I can get it very fast, because we have an arrangement with other dealers in this area where we trade cars with them, so that we all sort of operate out of the same area-wide pool. But what if I have everything he wants except a CD player? Or maybe I even have a car with exactly the right stereo or can get it, but I have it in gray instead of powder blue. How much of a lie am I telling the customer? A very small one at most. And anyway, when he comes in, if he complains, I can blame it on a mistake in the records. Most people who want to buy a car want to buy it now, and that's when I want to sell it. It might take a month to Specialized order the exact one he wants. And in most cases, a person is not that hung up on every last detail of the automobile he has set his mind on. There are a couple of dozen or so colors, and the factory would not be painting the cars in all those colors if a lot of people didn't like them. So I am giving him pretty much what he wants. When you ask the butcher for a pound of sirloin, you don't tell him to stuff it if it is 15 or 17 ounces instead of 16 ounces, just as long as you don't have to pay for what you're not getting. I am not recommending that anybody lie to anybody. I really do believe that honesty is the best policy. But honesty is a matter of degree. It is never all one way or the other. When a customer comes in with his wife and son, and you say, "That's a handsome little boy you have there. Is that true or false?" He may be the most miserable looking kid in history. But you sure aren't going to say that if you are looking to make some money. If you are selling a man a new overcoat, you're going to look at his old one and say, "You sure got good wear out of that one," even if what you are thinking is, "That went out of style 2 years before you bought it, and you should have thrown it away before it got threadbare in the elbows." He'll like what you're selling if you like what he has. All of this probably sounds obvious to you, but I have seen salesmen kill a deal by trying to put down the customer with the truth rather than tell a small, kind lie. When a customer asks the salesman how much he'll allow for his trade-in, I have heard salesmen say, "That piece of junk." Now the car may have 4 bald tires and no spare. It may be burning more oil than a diesel engine. It may smell like the locker room after a basketball game. But it is his, and it got him to you, and he may love it. Even if he doesn't, it's up to him to knock it. If you do, you are insulting the man. So lie a little. Tell him how good a driver he must have been to get 120,000 miles out of any car. That will make him feel good. So good, in fact, that he may not give you much argument when you offer him only what it is really worth. What I am getting at is not just that people like to be flattered, even when they know that what you're saying isn't completely true. More importantly, it creates a pleasant, Disarming atmosphere when you toss off a few small compliments about his wife's dress, his kid's cuteness, or even the eyeglass frames he is wearing. Whatever you say like that, it is small talk that gets the customer over those first fears that you want to take the gold out of his teeth. It is what military men call a diversionary action, and even if the guy doesn't respond, I try to keep it up until I get him to give a little. I'll get into other kinds of conversational topics later, but you never want to get so involved with some other subject that you forget why he came in. He may, but you never should, not even for a second. You are an actor in the selling situation, and that is something you never should forget. Timing is the most valuable quality any performer can have, but it is something you have to work into. When I want to get away for a weekend, I usually go to Las Vegas. I do it for a couple of reasons. 1, because that is the only place I gamble. I don't expect to win, but I never bet so much that I can't afford to lose. I know what the odds are, and I know that they are against me. But it's fun. The second reason I go to Las Vegas is to watch one of the best performers in the world, Don Rickles. I watch his timing, his facial expressions, and even the way he does his famous insults. Not that I ever want to insult a customer, but I want to watch the way he can dump on somebody in the audience and then turn the person's anger into a smile. Turning anger into a smile is like what we do, turning fear into trust, turning no into yes. You want the customer to trust you while you are selling him, and you want him to trust you after he leaves. That is why you never want to tell him a big lie that he can check later. You never want to tell him anything that he will get laughed at by his friends and relatives for believing. You never want to tell him anything that will make him feel foolish later. And sometimes you want to stop a person from doing something on his own that will embarrass him later. There are a lot of businesses where the real price of a product varies a lot from what is on the price tag. In the car business, as everybody knows, there is a sticker on the window of every new car with the manufacturer's suggested price at the bottom of that sticker. Most people know that most cars can be bought for less than what it says on the sticker. Some, like Corvettes, are hard to get and do sell for the sticker price. So did Cadillac convertibles and a lot of imported cars. But most American cars can be bought for less than that price tag, and, as I said, most people know that. But some people don't, especially if they come from a rural town where 1 or 2 dealers don't give the usual discounts. Sometimes somebody will come into me, look at a car, and start to write a check for the full amount on the window sticker. What's wrong with that? You ask? Nothing, really. That's what it says on the price tag, and a lot of people expect to pay the price and don't even know how to haggle. Some people just don't like to do that. Then why not take the customer's money? Well, in a lot of businesses, that's what you do. But in the car business, especially selling a high-volume car like Chevrolet that you can buy anywhere, this can be risky. A lot of car salesmen don't agree with me. But I think they are wrong to take the full price every time somebody really wants to pay it. Suppose that the customer buys the car and goes to his lodge meeting. One of the things about new cars is that people love to show them off to their friends and neighbors. That can be a very effective way to close a deal, as I will describe later. But take this customer. He has just paid the full list price, and he gets to his meeting and brings the boys out to the parking lot to look at his new car. "What did it cost you, Charlie?" somebody asks, and Charlie points to the sticker he has left on to show that it is brand new. "What? You must be some idiot to pay the sticker price for a new car these days." So what does Charlie think of me? I embarrassed him and cheated him, and all his friends and lodge brothers knew that he was a dummy. Give a little and you'll get a lot back. Well, I know that the salesman who takes the full price makes more commission, but I don't think it is worth the risk in most cases. I'll give up the chance to make a couple of $100 extra in exchange for the chance to make a friend of Charlie. Because if he starts to write a check for the full amount and I say, "Take off $250, or "I'll throw in door guard trim and 5 steel radials for nothing," Charlie is going to think I am the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he is going to tell people about me, maybe even about how he started to write a check for the full amount and I, Joe Girard, wouldn't let him. Now that sticker price is the truth. But you can get into bad trouble with a customer if you let him believe it, even though it is true. I don't claim to be an automotive engineer. I didn't finish high school, and I wasn't such a superstar during the years I was there. So I don't get too involved with the technical details of the cars I sell. It is not like I am selling tandem axle, over-the-road trucks to technical people. But sometimes a customer comes in with some technical fact stuck in his head. His brother-in-law told him that if you get a certain rear axle ratio on the car, you'll save gas. Well, I have checked, and it amounts to pennies. So when a guy asks me if the car has a 3:1:5 ratio, like he wants, I'll say, "You're right. You sure know your cars, don't you?" That serves two purposes. First of all, it makes him feel good. Second of all, it keeps my selling effort from being interrupted by my having to look in the specification book or call the service department or even the factory. If the customer brings up something that will make a lot of difference, I'll check it out. Because I don't want him ever to think I stiffed him on anything. Not ever. But the axle ratio and stuff like that don't matter. I wouldn't tell anybody a polyester suit was 100% wool, though. And I wouldn't tell a housewife that a refrigerator was 22 cubic feet when it was only 17. Because people find out about things like that, and then they never forget. And even if they are too ashamed to tell their friends what you did, they will badmouth you and your store and your products in some other way. Girard's Law of 250 is always operating. So we get back to honesty as the best policy, with a little flattery and even a small lie useful in some cases. All you ever get from telling a big lie is a chance to tell your buddies later how you stiffed some mooch. But if that is the kind of kick you get from selling, you're going to dig your own grave sooner or later. And you are going to make it tough for the rest of us who want to make money by making satisfied customers who come back again and again and send in their friends. If you don't believe that, take my word for it. I sell more cars than anybody else in the world, and I believe it. You never get caught by telling the truth or making a prospect feel good when you stretch it. Chapter 14. Facing the Customer. Ask people to describe the typical car salesman, and chances are they'll tell you he wears the latest designer suit, whether that means a Ralph Lauren, Zegna, or even Brooks Brothers. They'll tell you he wears Italian loafers and a white-on-white t-shirt. In other words, they'll tell you that the typical car salesman is wearing maybe $1,000 on his back and on his feet. And that is the way they think of it expensive. Then they start to think, this guy is going to make too much money off me. I make a lot of money, and I have for years. And I like good clothes, and I wear them whenever I can. But one place I do not wear my best clothes is to work. Don't get me wrong, I dress neat and clean. Nothing cheap. But I don't look like I need to hustle you to pay my tailor. I believe a salesman should look as much as possible like the people to whom he sells. I sell Chevrolets, not Mercedes. Millions of people buy Chevrolets every year, but they are not generally your richest people. And in my area, they are mostly working people. They work in the factories and offices around here, and they work hard for their money, and they aren't in the top brackets. So if they walk in and are met by a guy with clothes that look expensive, they get even more scared than they were before. We are not talking about poor people. A poor man doesn't buy a new car, not even the lowest priced Cavalier. My customers pay an average of $15,000 for the cars they buy from me. But a lot of them have to borrow most of that money from the bank, the finance company, or their credit union. They are good credit risks, but they are not high rollers. And that's how I want them to see me. That's how I want to look at them, like a guy who is in their bracket and who understands their economics. Look like you're their kind of guy. When they see me for the first time, they relax a little, because I wear a sports shirt and slacks. I never wear clothes that will antagonize my customers and make them feel uneasy. I am not wearing colorless nail polish like a lot of salesmen who get a lot of manicures. That puts people off too. Working guys may have grease under their nails that can't come off, but they expect a salesman to be clean. You'd think any salesman would know that. But I've seen some flashy guys in this business who don't seem to have taken a bath in a long time, nail polish or not. A working guy may not have had time to go to the sauna after he left the factory, but he has a right to expect his salesman to take the trouble to be clean. You may think I'm making too much of this point, but let me assure you that I'm not. People complain to me about other salesmen, so it's important. When a customer comes into my office, he finds a neat business-like place that doesn't rub him the wrong way. I know some guys who decorate their offices with religious pictures and all kinds of stuff that people consider controversial. If your aunt brought you a blessed picture of the Pope from Rome, that's a real keepsake. But hang it at home. A lot of people, even Catholics, may not think that's the right sort of thing for your office walls. I put up sales award certificates and plaques, so people will know they are dealing with a top salesman. After all, they think, if this fellow sells so many cars, he must be giving good deals. At least that's what I want them to think, and it's true. I also keep away from the customer's view of things like color charts, brochures showing optional equipment, and anything else that may give a person a chance to pick up something and start worrying about what color or what kind of accessories he should have. He didn't come in to buy a sky blue car with electric window controls. He came in to buy a car from me, period. All the rest comes later after he has decided that he wants to buy a car from me, so I don't want to give him an opportunity to start flipping through a book so he can get off the hook by saying that he needs more time to think about everything. And I don't want him to start loading up the car before he has decided that he is going to buy. Because, before you know it, he will want so much that he won't be able to afford anything. And the price will be so high that everybody he calls will be able to give him a lower price because they won't be quoting a car with wall-to-wall Persian rugs and special order metallic paint. Get them obligated to you. I don't give my customers a reclining easy chair to sit in either. I want them to relax, but I don't want them to get so comfortable that I can't get through to them. Relaxing them is crucial, of course, but I have a lot more effective ways to relax a customer and get him obligated to me. A comfortable chair won't do that, but other things will. He starts to pat his pockets looking for a cigarette, and I ask him what he smokes because I don't want him to remember that he has cigarettes in the glove compartment of his car and run out to get one. I keep a lot of brands in my office. Whatever he smokes, chances are I've got a pack, and I give it to him. That's okay, keep the pack. Wow, keep the pack. Who tells a customer that? I do. What does it cost? A few dollars. And now he is obligated to me. Matches, of course, he gets free. What else? How about a drink? What do you drink? Wine? Scotch? I've got that too. Free. And he won't have to drink alone, because I take out a vodka bottle filled with 100 proof water and drink along with him. I don't want him falling on his face. I just want him relaxed enough to let me help him get what he wants and can afford. If he brings his kid in, I've got balloons and lollipops for him. And I've got buttons for everybody in the family that say nothing but, I like you. Anything I put in his hands and in his family's hands makes him feel a little obligated to me. Not too much, but just enough. Sometimes a person will walk in and start looking at a car on the floor. I'll go over and stay near him, but not too close. Once in a while, a guy will get down on the floor and look underneath. So will I. It may sound crazy, but it is a very good opener. The man sees you just looking at him, and maybe he laughs, and you are ready to start working on him. Once in a while, somebody will admire the shirt I'm wearing. I like to wear colorful polka dot sports shirts, and I'll say, you like it? Here, it's yours. And I'll start to take it off. I want him to know that if that's what it will take to make him happy, I'll be glad to give it to him. I keep an extra shirt in my office in case a person actually follows through and takes mine. I think only one ever did. But I'm ready for him, and just the gesture, as a joke, can do a lot to break the ice. Whether we get to that point or not, I want everybody to think I'll do anything for them, even give them the shirt off my back. I keep my office as neat as possible. There is nothing distracting for the customer to look at and to start thinking about. When we are talking about prices and deals, if I have to look something up or do some figuring on my adding machine, I don't do it where he can look over my shoulder. I keep that stuff on top of a filing cabinet a few feet away from my desk. I am the only one who gets to see the figures and the tape from the machine. Another thing I always do is clean up after a prospect leaves. I straighten everything, empty the ashtrays, put away the glasses, and spray the place with an air deodorizer. A lot of people don't like the smell of alcohol or smoke, and they don't run into it when they come into my office. The way I look at it, I am an actor playing a part. I want the stage to be just right for the show I am going to put on, and I want my costume to be exactly right too. What I said about how I dress applies to my kind of customers. I am not saying that you should dress that way if your neighborhood, your customers, and the practices and rules in your area are different. A top salesman is a first-rate actor. He plays a part and convinces his audience, the customer, that he is what he is playing. If your customers are flashy dressers, then you ought to look like them. I know my customers, and I know what they expect. I know them so well since most of them ask for me by name and know, that I can meet them without a shave and know that they'll probably appreciate that. But, however, you do it. The thing that matters most is that you know your customers, if not by name, at least by style and type. Then you too will be able to disarm them and win the war. If those first moments of contact with you help them to relax a little, to overcome their fear, and they begin to feel obligated to you for taking up your time, you have already started to win. Get them with you from the start and they will stay with you. Chapter 15. Selling the Smell. One of the great evangelists of selling once said that to win, what we have to do is sell the sizzle, not the steak. Well, that's exactly what you have to do in selling cars. After all, most of my customers have already owned a car, and maybe even a Chevrolet, and they certainly have seen a lot of cars in their lives. There must be more than 100 million of them on the streets, so a Chevrolet, all by itself, is no big deal to them. What is a big deal is a shiny new one that will feel good to touch, to sit in, and to own. And the thing about a new car that turns on more people than anything else is its smell. Have you ever noticed the smell of a brand new car? If you were blindfolded, you'd still be able to tell what it was if someone put you in a new car. Touching the car and seeing it makes some people drool to own it. But nothing turns people on like the smell. So I always want to make every customer smell it. I didn't say let, I said make. A lot of people are afraid to get into a new car at first, and they are very reluctant to drive it. That's because they are afraid that they will feel obligated somehow, which is why I say push them into it if you have to. Because you want them to feel obligated, like they have broken the seal or unwrapped it so they have to buy it. Once they get in and smell, they want it. That is such an obvious fact that you would think that every salesman who has ever sold even one car would know it. But it is always a subject of sales training meetings because a lot of salesmen don't think it is worth the trouble. Why bother? The mooch knows what it's like. All he wants is the right price. Remember the smells that sold you. Anybody who says that doesn't know his own feelings. But I never forget things in my life that excited me the first time. I remember the first time I ever had my hands on a new power drill. It wasn't mine. A kid down the block got it for Christmas. But I was there when he unwrapped it, a new Black & Decker, and I took it from him and plugged it in and couldn't stop drilling holes in everything. And I remember the first new car I was in. I was already grown up, and the only cars I had ever been in were old ones where the upholstery stank sour. But one of the guys in the neighborhood got one after the war. I was in it the first day, and I'll never forget that smell. When you're selling other things, it may not be quite the same. You sell a man a life insurance policy, and there's nothing you can let him smell or drive. But anything that moves or feels, you've got to let him have some. Who would try to sell a man a cashmere coat without getting him to stroke it first? So be sure that you put him in the car. I always do. It makes him lust to own it. And even if I lose the sale, I have a shot at getting him back once he has to go back to the smell of his own again. And when I put a man in a new car, I don't say anything to him. I just let him drive it. You'll hear from the so-called experts that this is the time to sell him all the features of your product. But I don't believe it. I find that the less I talk, the more he smells and feels and starts to talk. And I want him to smell and feel and talk. Because I want to hear what he likes and what he's worried about. I want him to help me qualify him by telling me where he works and something about his family and where he lives. A lot of times, a customer will tell you everything you need to sell him and to get his credit approved just while you are sitting in the passenger seat. And that is a must, letting him drive it. People like to try things out, to touch them, to play with them. Remember the shock absorber displays they had in gas stations where you would pull a handle with a worn-out shock and then pull a handle with a new shock? Well, I'm sure most of you have at one time tried working them. We are curious. No matter what you sell, look for ways in which you can demonstrate your product. The important thing is to be sure that the prospect participates in the demonstration. If you can appeal to their senses, then you are also appealing to their emotions. I'd say that more things are bought through emotions than through logic. Once he is behind the wheel, chances are he is going to ask you where he should go. I always tell him to go wherever he wants to go. If he lives in the neighborhood, I suggest that he drive by the house. Then he can let his wife and kids see it. Some neighbors may be out on the porch. I want him to let everybody see him behind the wheel of that new car because I want him to feel like he has bought that car and is showing it off. That helps lock up his decision because he may not want to come home and tell everybody he couldn't make a good deal. I don't want to hook a customer too much, just a little. I don't want the customer to take the car too far, because my time is worth a lot of money. But a person taking a demonstration drive will tend to think it is too far when it really isn't. So I let a man drive as much as he likes, because if he thinks he has gone a little too far, that also helps to make him feel obligated to me. Getting him hooked. When I talk about hooking the customer and making him feel obligated, I don't mean to say I am doing anything bad to the person. There is never a point in the selling situation, even after he signs the order, when he can't say no and back out. So he is on equal terms with me. But I feel that I have a perfect right to assume that if somebody comes into my place of business to see me, he is there because he is interested in buying a car from me. It is my duty to him, as well as to myself, to help him clear up his doubts and fears and buy a car. When I talk about smell, I really mean it. But it stands for a lot of things besides the smell itself. To me, the smell of a new car stands for the excitement of the experience. I suppose there are people these days who don't get a thrill when they buy a new car. Maybe they have had so many, it doesn't matter to them anymore. But for most people, me included, buying something new, even as ordinary as buying a new shirt, is exciting. I want to take it home and put it on and show it off. And there is hardly anything to compare to the excitement of a new car. For a lot of people, it is almost like having a baby. They practically want to hand out cigars and send announcements. It is all part of what I call the smell. That feeling, you could almost say, sells the car by itself. Almost, but not really. Because a lot of salesmen don't understand it, so they don't use it. You have to use it to get it to work for you. You don't just let it happen. You don't just let anything happen if you are a real pro. You make it all happen. You make sure the customer has the opportunity to smell and feel the excitement, the thrill of it all. I want to add one final word on the value of selling the smell. In the years just after World War II, new cars were scarce, and a lot of potential new car buyers had to settle for late-model used cars. At that time, a product came onto the market that was bought by a lot of used car dealers. That product was a liquid that the dealer sprayed in the trunk and on the floors of late-model used cars. The reason? It made them smell like new cars. But you know the value of that smell because you certainly remember the first time it hit your nose. So never forget that. Look back into your own experience as a consumer whenever you are selling to somebody else. Because we all share a lot of experiences. And if that smell turns you on, you can bet it will turn on almost everybody. Whatever you sell, there is an equivalent of the smell of a new car. Think of yourself as a customer. Think of what excites you about a product, or used to when you first bought it. Then use that experience to sell the excitement, the thrill of owning your product. Chapter 16. Espionage and Intelligence. In every other kind of war, each side spies on the other and has intelligence agents whose job it is to find out what its side is going up against. In selling, we usually call that qualifying the customer. But qualify is a word that has a lot of different meanings. One of them is eligible. And let me tell you that, as far as I'm concerned, everybody is qualified to buy a car from me. That's why I like to think of this part of the selling job as espionage and intelligence. I want to know what the customer wants to do, what he ought to do, and what he can afford to do. Sometimes all of those things turn out to be the same, but a lot of the time they are different. What the customer wants may not be something he'll be happy with or can afford. I listen to what a customer says he wants, and I try to give it to him. But if I think it won't work for him, or that he can't afford it and can afford something better, then I make up my own mind. But how do I know what to try to sell to the customer? I look and I listen and I ask. What I look and listen for are things that will open him up and get him talking so that he will tell me about himself, his needs, and his ability to pay. But I don't always let him make those decisions. Very often, maybe in a majority of cases, I decide. Because the customer often doesn't really know what he can handle and what he should buy. Most people don't understand enough about life insurance to know what they need, so they let their salesman decide. When it comes to clothes, people know they want something different, something fashionable, or at least something that won't make them look conspicuous because it is out of style. So the salesperson works it out with them. It's a kind of negotiation based on what's in style, what's available, and what looks good on them. No clothing salesman in his right mind would sell a person something that would make him look awful. but people can disagree on how someone looks at something. So there is a wide margin for making those kinds of decisions by both customer and salesman. With a car, it is not quite the same. You don't try very hard to sell a man a 2-seat sports car if he has a wife and 4 kids. If it's his second or third car and he is loaded, it doesn't much matter. But you know that if you manage to push him into a little job when he needs a big one, you'll have created one very unhappy fellow. And you don't want to do this, no matter how sure he is that he wants that nifty little number. So you're playing a game with the customer, trying to find out what's best for him no matter what he says. Because what's best for him is best for you, if you want him to speak well of you and come back someday for another one. And don't forget that, at this point, you are dealing with a scared man. Getting his name is crucial. He walks in the front door, and the first thing I say is, "Hi, my name is Joe Girard." And the very next thing I say is not, "What's your name?" I don't want to scare him anymore. I don't want him to start pulling back right away. So instead of asking, I say, "And your name is..." He won't hesitate a second before he finishes that sentence and tells me his name. Notice that I really didn't ask him. I just didn't give him any reason to see me as somebody trying to dig into his insides. It was natural and casual, and I got his name. From then on, I used it, because we now have a personal relationship. He's Bill and I'm Joe. And if he tries to call me Mr., I let him know that it's Joe. I've broken a little ice. As I said before, if he starts out by walking around a car on the floor or even crawling under it, so do I. I don't say much because I want to know a lot, but I want him to give it to me without my prying it out of him. I may ask him what he's got in mind or what he's driving now, but mostly I'll just be passive and wait for him. He's going to tell me something, and once he starts to talk, I'll stay with him and move with him. But I will never crowd him at this stage of the game. I want to draw him out, let him show himself like in military intelligence, where you want to let the enemy reveal himself. Too much, you hope. If somebody starts out by asking for me by name, which happens a lot of the time, then I have a good opener. I ask him how he heard about me. He may say he read about me somewhere, and then I'll follow up and ask him where, and we're talking. Or he may give me somebody's name, which I tell him I know even if I never heard of the guy. Or he'll say he heard about me at the plant. What plant? And we'll be talking about where he works. However he answers, I get the conversation to start moving, and maybe I learn something useful, like whom he knows that I know or where he works. If I get a name I know, then I can ask if he lives near the other fellow, and I know something about the neighborhood and can try to figure out his income from that. We go from the plant to his job, and that leads to another estimate of his income. I try to be like a machine that he doesn't notice is turned on, like maybe a recorder or a computer. Because there is nothing he is going to say about a neighborhood or some suburb or a bowling alley or a factory that I can't make him think I know something about. Whatever he says, I've got an answer that is a half question and gets him going some more and keeps me from getting in too deep about something or someplace I don't know very well. While we're going on about his bowling league at the plant and how well his team is doing, I'll spring on him, very casually, this, "Let me have your keys and we'll get an appraisal for you." Notice that I don't ask, "Do you have a car to trade in?" I don't want to ask that question because it will start him thinking in the wrong direction. He'll start to figure that if he says yes, he'll be going too far into a deal. Or he may want to lie and say no because he figures that he should get my best price and then spring the trade on me to get maybe an even better price on the trade and allowance. It doesn't work that way, of course. You get as much as we can give you, as much as the book says, no matter when we figure in the value of the trade-in. But a lot of people figure they can play another game if they hold off. What I want to do is get him involved without his awareness, in a way that makes it a little harder for him to start throwing up barriers against me. I have to catch him quick. Otherwise, he'll work all the dodges. You watch him when he tries to say he doesn't have a trade, and you can usually tell from his eyes if he is telling the truth or trying to play games. I mean, there are people who want to give the old car to their father or their kid who has just reached driving age, but mostly they want to trade the old one for the new one. So I cut through all the dodges by saying, "Give me the keys." These days, I don't usually look at the trade-ins, because I have somebody working for me who does that. I'll discuss the way I use extra help later and, more important, how most salesmen in this sort of business can't afford to use extra help. But for a long time I looked over the trade-ins, and sometimes I still do. How to read a customer. An experienced salesman can read a customer, his house, and his car like a book. Most people don't notice what other people are wearing or where they live or what they drive. But if you pay attention to details, like how shiny the elbows are and things like that, you can learn a lot. I can walk around and look inside a person's car and tell you everything about it and about its owner. There are obvious things, like how many miles on the odometer, and the number of service station stickers on the door jamb and their mileage. Obviously, they tell me how much driving the man does in a year and how carefully he takes care of his car. Now those things tell you directly about the value of the car. If he gets it serviced often, it tells you he is a careful person. If his mileage is way above average, I've got something to talk about with him. I can ask if he travels a lot or has gone on some very long vacation trips. When I look in the front seat and in the glove compartment of the car, I'm looking for brochures from other dealers and makes. They will tell me as much as anything what kind of car he has been looking for and how many different prices he has been quoted. From that, I get a pretty clear idea of how low I have to go to get him. If his tires are badly worn, I know he is facing an outlay of $150 or more for a new set. That puts him a long way down the road to a new car, because a lot of people start figuring that they might as well go all the way and spend a big hunk of change on nothing but a set of tires. When I open the trunk to look at his spare tire and I find fishing tackle, I have something else to talk about. Fishermen love to talk about where they fish and what they have caught. And if I see a trailer hitch on the rear end, that tells me even more about him. He is a camper or a boater. Now, if his car is an obvious junker, I have to be careful. He may not have enough miles on it to get home, which is great for me to know, because it means he pretty much has to buy a car right away. But I can't tell him that. A man's car is like his wife. He can make fun of it all he wants to, but as soon as somebody else tries to, he gets insulted. So I'll be very careful about what I say if the car is a dog. Mostly, I tell him it looks really good considering the mileage or the age. Another thing I keep an eye out for is windshield and bumper stickers. Political stuff I say nothing about because politics is not something you can talk about with a customer without getting into trouble. If my own son were running for president, I wouldn't wear a Girard for President button to work. But I want to talk about the other kinds of stickers that resorts put on, or that you get when you go to national parks and other tourist attractions. Because wherever that guy has been, I have been. Even if I never heard of the place, I'll find some way to use it to break some more ice. And if there is a baby seat or any toys, bike carriers, sleeping bags, or anything else, I have learned something about the man, his needs and interests, and the way he treats the things he owns. Zeroing in. When I get back to him, I'll say, "You keep that car in good shape." That gets us past questions about how much I'm going to allow him on it and makes him feel I like it. Now maybe I'll ask him, "What did you have in mind?" And then we start to go. He may say he wants another one just like it. Maybe he complains that it rattles too much, so I'll suggest a 2-door instead of a 4-door. They do rattle a little less and, better than that from my standpoint, they cost a little less. So I can quote him a lower price than he may have got from someone else on a 4-door. If you're selling houses and a guy complains about all the lawn mowing he had to do, you aren't going to suggest a place with a huge yard. If he complains about walking up all the stairs, you won't offer him a 3-floor colonial. You'll come up with a 1-floor ranch house. Same thing with cars. You are going to put him into something that carries his family, hauls his boat, and fits his pocketbook. But if I sense that a customer is choking up, I won't keep driving to a close. I'll back off a little. Maybe I'll pick up the car seat I saw in his car and ask him how old his baby is. He'll probably bring out the pictures in his wallet and I'll look in lavish praise. Unless he asks me, I'm not going to talk about my family. This is not a social situation. This is selling, and I believe that one of the dumbest things that salesmen can do is compete with a customer. He brings out pictures of the kids. And a lot of salesmen will bring out pictures of their kids. That's not the smartest thing you can do, because you're trying to top him. When you do that, you're saying, "You think that's something, look at mine." He doesn't care about your kids' pictures. He wants to show off his. What good do you accomplish by competing? None at all. Let him have the stage. Just sit there and look. If I see a fishing tackle in the car, I'll ask him about where he's been fishing lately. And pretty soon he'll tell me about a fish he caught that was this big. I hear some salesmen come right back with, "That's nothing. I caught one that big last Sunday." So what? So you've made him think that maybe the biggest event in his life isn't worth talking about. Maybe you caught a 40-foot white shark named Jaws. But like I said, this isn't a bragging contest at the local bowling alley. This is business, and if all he caught was a minnow, make him think it was the whale that swallowed Jonah. You want to bring him over to your side and beat him. But if you do it with fishing statistics, he'll turn against you and wriggle off the hook. I've already discussed the importance of the demonstration ride. You're giving him a piece of the merchandise, a free sample, and you want to give him enough so that he'll want it all. I want him to take a ride so that he'll want it all. I want him to take a ride so that he'll feel he has got something for nothing and owes me a little something. And I want him in the car so that he can take it somewhere, and his kids and his friends and his coworkers can see him in it. That makes it a little harder for him to go back to driving his junker. And I want him in that car because I want to see where he goes and hear everything he wants to say about it, including what he doesn't like if anything. But most of all, as I have said before, I want him to get that smell way up into his sinuses and into his brain because then I'm getting him hooked on it. And that is when it gets very hard to go back to the stale smell of his clunker out there on the street. When he has got that full treatment and is still with me, we go into the office, the door is closed, and no phone calls are allowed to interrupt the next steps. We are still talking and feeling each other out. When I finish looking at his car, I may ask, "It's paid for, isn't it?" If he says he's got a couple of payments left, I know that he is a credit customer and that my ability to arrange financing and get the monthly payments right for him may be more important than the total price. We may talk a lot about the total price, but what he may care most about is, how much a month? Credit is the American way. That is the fact with most big-ticket items for most people, and there's nothing for a customer to be ashamed of. Everybody buys in installments. That's the American way. If you wait till you have it all in the bank, you may wait all your life for nothing. But a lot of people are still a little ashamed that they don't pay cash for everything. So you have to handle it carefully, especially if the customer has been paying over a very long period and has hardly any equity in the car, even though it is almost all paid up. Sometimes my ability to sell a customer at all depends on my ability to get him enough credit to let him pay for the car. If he is really strapped or has had a tax lien or a recent bankruptcy, I can still find ways to get him the money to buy the car. But if that's the case, I have to know about it, because that changes the nature of the deal. Price is out the window. Now, all we are talking about is finding a way to get credit for the customer, whether we have to get a cosigner or, in some cases, even put the car in a friend's name. We'll go into the way I get a friend to co-sign a note for a customer later. And using the device of putting the car in somebody else's name requires great care. If you are going to resort to that, the thing you have to be sure of is that you tell the bank or finance company in advance that this is what you are doing. Otherwise, you are not obeying the law. They have to know in advance because they have to know where to find the car if they ever have to repossess it. The important thing about credit is that you want to know as soon as possible whether you have to sell the customer on price or on your ability to find him the money, regardless of price. There is no sense in dancing around the price if his credit rating is 0. But if his car is paid for or nearly paid for, we've got no problems. And as soon as I have found out that he's okay, I start chipping away at his natural fear again. I'll maybe pick up on the Yellowstone Park sticker he's got on the window. I ask him about the trip and listen. If he asks if I've been there, I'll probably say yes, but I'm still going to let him tell me, not me tell him, because I want to let him talk about something he enjoyed, something pleasant so that he'll relax. I know when the customer is relaxing because I read his body language. I watch his face, his eyes, the way he holds his arms close to him, and his legs crossed tight until he starts letting loose a little. While all of this is going on, I am finding out what he needs and what he can be sold. There are enough different models, sizes, trim, and accessories so that I can figure out a car that is just about any price it takes to sell him, just so long as it will do the job for him. I can trade him up to a Monte Carlo or down to a Cavalier or even an Aveo from the Impala he has been thinking about. Of course, I'd like to make it easy and sell him exactly what he has in mind when he walks in. But he may not be able to afford that, or he may really be able to afford something bigger and better. I can go either way. What I need to know is how much shopping he has already done and what prices have been quoted to him. I need to know this because I am probably going to get him by making him think he is getting the best possible price from me. I don't mean that he won't. He will if I can help it, because I'd rather make a little less per car and sell a lot of them than be a hog and just sell a few. That's the philosophy. That's the system that has made me the world's greatest salesman. I take in more than any other car salesman does because I want to sell more cars, not get higher prices. Do that and the rest takes care of itself. And, of course, you send out a happy customer who talks you up wherever he goes and sends back even more business. If I know that he has brochures from other dealers in his car, or I see them in his pocket, I know he already has prices in mind. But even if I don't know that, I can find it out easily. By this time we are in my office. I've given him a drink or a cigar. If his kids came in with him, they'd got balloons and lollipops. I've played with the kids and even got on my knees to talk to them if necessary. No problem. My office floor is clean, and besides, I can buy a few pairs of slacks with the commission from just one sale. So it's worth it. A lot of salesmen will get to their desks and put a blank pad on top. That way, they figure they can write down all the information about the customer and the car they are selling him. It's a nice system, they figure. Wrong. It's a dumb system because if you do that, and then you get the guy close to the end, you can't finish him off. Getting ready for the close. What I do is always keep a blank order form and a credit application on my desk. Then, as we talk and I get information about the customer and where he lives, what he does, and what he wants, that goes right on the forms. Then if I get him right up to the finish, I've got a filled-in order and all I need is a signature. The other way you've got to transfer all the information from the pad to the forms. And while you're doing that, the guy can remember that he's got to buy a collar button before the jewelry store closes. And he runs and you've lost him. I'm not saying you should lock the door and take the doorknob off to keep the customer there. I don't play it that way. But when we got to that point in the process, I spent an hour or more of my own and my associate's time. And that is worth a lot of money to me. And it damned well ought to be to the customer. If he came that far and his intentions weren't serious, he is a bad guy. Of course, if I couldn't meet the legitimate price of somebody else, which is unlikely, or I didn't have a car anywhere near what he wanted, which is practically impossible, the person has a perfect right to leave without buying. Because if that happens, it means I haven't done my job professionally. If I lose a customer at that point, it means I have done something wrong. We all know that you can't sell them all. We all know that some people come in just because they have nothing else to do. But if you assume that about anybody without going over the whole thing in your mind to find out what you did wrong, you will not be doing the proper job of training and retraining yourself. You have to assume that you are guilty of bad selling until proven innocent by your own self-examination. But the commonest reason for losing a customer who seemed really interested is not listening enough, not watching the face and the body movements of the customer. If you don't spend enough time and concentration on that, you are going to miss something that the guy is telling you without trying to tell you. And that something probably has to do with why he is afraid, why he is hesitating, and what you are not doing to get him over the last hurdles. Everybody hates silence, and most people want to jump out of silence. Let your customer do that. Let him talk because he can't stand the silence. Let him offer you the clues to his hesitation and reluctance. You can learn a lot more by watching and listening than you can by talking. But there are moments when the salesman can gain by talking. The guy is uneasy, he's twitching, smiling foolishly, tapping his toes, and doing all those things that people do when they are uncomfortable and afraid. You watch and you notice, and you figure he really has a bug up him. But you don't know what it is. You have found out what he needs and what he can afford, but you aren't moving him toward a close. It's quiet. Nothing is happening except his unease. So you ask a question. That is sometimes a pretty good way to get an answer. But you don't ask him a question that he can answer yes or especially no. You don't ask, is there anything else you want to know? Because he can say no, and you've blown it. You ask something he has to answer with real words. What have I left out? What didn't I tell you that you need to know to make up your mind? Or even something as direct as, what did I do wrong? That can make a customer feel he should help you. And you can start getting hold of him then. When I talk about nailing down a customer at this point, I don't mean losing him. There really is no sharp line between qualifying and closing. Of course, we talk about them as separate things, but if you are handling your selling situation properly, there is a smooth flow from one step to the next. You know when the intelligence phase is over because you know what the customer really wants and needs and can afford to buy. If you know all that and know that you know it, you are at the next step. Let the customer reveal himself while you watch and listen, and he'll lay himself open for the close.